Welcome back, my pack, my tribe, to Halloween After Dark. Sorry about the technical difficulties there. That was very strange. Um, anyways, as I was talking about the Hollywood, one of Hollywood's biggest mysteries is the murder of George Reeves, or has been. Um, I mean, it's there's been suspects in the case, um, namely his well, sort of girlfriend at the time. I want to make sure I get the name right. It's kind of a like not supermanly type behavior on Reeves' part in a way, um, especially for that time. He okay. Let me explain. See, he at the time was actually engaged to a up and coming Hollywood actress by the name of Leonore Lemon. Um, no relation, as far as I know, to Jack. So, anyways, so he was engaged, and on the side, he was also having relations with a woman by the name of Tony Mannix. Tony was the wife of an MGM vice president and notorious fixer by the name of Eddie Mannix. So obviously, it had been suggested that Tony and who felt snubbed by Reeves because he had just broken it off with her because he wanted to actually make it work with Leonore. Um, had either indirectly or directly killed Reeves along with her husband, Eddie Mannix. Long suspected that this be the case. Now there's possibly evidence to prove it. Um, Documents from Golden Era MGM have come to light that point possible. Trying to think of how to put this. There's a possible financial tie-in to the case and the Mannixes. Now, once again, I know what you're thinking. What does this have to do with paranormal? Well, if you know about George Reeves' case, you know that he has been haunting for years his former home in LA's Benedict Canyon. Um, and one of the more amusing uh, sightings, I guess you could say, that I've heard of uh, was from, I think it was like in the 1970s. Um, Reeves had appeared in the boudoir, the bedroom, in his Superman uniform at the foot of the bed while the married couple that lived there at the time were having marital relations. I mean, picture that. I mean, seriously, that must have been kind of how shall we say belittling of his manhood. Yeah, you sit there making love to his wife, and all of a sudden there's Superman. They're almost as if he's being judged by Superman himself. I mean, that had to rock that guy's world for sure, mentally, emotionally. All I'm saying is I feel sorry for the guy. So yeah, he's haunted that location for years. Um, and there's been several sightings. There's been audio uh, things going on. In one case I've heard of, uh, many years later, even after the couple he walked in on uh, lived there, uh, this lady reported hearing a gunshot in the house, as if it was actually happening right then and there. And for those of you that are, um, how shall we say, not educated on Hollywood yesteryear, just to point out, yes, George Reeves did originally uh, play the original Superman on TV, the old black and white series, um, which was a big deal uh, in its day. Like it was so iconic. Like I can't even put it in words, really. The other old um, case that is picking up some traction apparently is the murder of Bob Crane. Um, I've talked about Bob Crane before on my show, um, but for those that maybe haven't heard it before or missed that episode or whatever, allow me to get into it again. Um, for many years, uh, well, not many, a few years, when I was much younger, I was actually performing in some clubs around Southern California as a stand up comedian. One of the main reasons I became a stand up is because I was influenced in my childhood, um, watching these old episodes of the very funny show called Hogan's Heroes. And if you're younger than like 35, chances are you've never seen it. But I encourage you, please check it out. It is some of the funniest shit TV's ever produced. Like in its day, which was in like the 60s, early 70s, Hogan's Heroes was like bigger than Friends. Like it was bigger than The Office. It was bigger than uh, 30 Rock. Like it was the biggest comedy on TV, bar none. And it was great because it was set during World War II at a prison camp, and Bob Crane played Colonel Robert Hogan. Um, and it was great because it was like every episode was like them trying to cook up some cockamamie way of escaping, and there's this character named Sergeant Schultz that was responsible for the prisoners, who was absolutely hilarious, uh, because he was kind of a big dumb guy, and it was just a fantastic show. Well, jump forward. Um, oh, and the other thing too that I didn't find out until later, that it's kind of awesome in a way, is I found out that he was a drummer uh, from about age 11, and so was I. I'm still a drummer, actually, um, although I play mostly for myself these days. But after the show ended, um, he was in another very short-lived show. Hogan's Heroes ended around 1971, and had played for 6 years, which was a really long time back then. Uh, and then 4 years later, in 1975, he had a very short-lived show that was on for less than a year, called The Bob Crane Show. It was like a talk show, like the Tonight Show, kind of. Um, and then after that, he was basically out of TV. He he decided to return to his roots and start performing in uh, dinner theaters and the like. And he would take occasional guest spots on television. Like there were a few old episodes of Hollywood Squares that he was on with his Hogan's Heroes co-star Robert Dawson. He might know as the host of Family Feud for years. Um, so he got involved with these plays, and he was on tour for a play called Beginner's Luck um, in June of 1978, and he was found bludgeoned to death in his Scottsdale apartment in Scottsdale, Arizona. Um, Officially, it's been unsolved since. Um, Now, here's the facts. Uh, Crane was somewhat of a playboy, and he had this way of meeting several different women and vetting them, and he met a gentleman named John H. Carpenter, John Henry Carpenter, who was a photographer and an engineer. He actually invented the VCR, and he worked for years for Kodak. Um, he was one of the biggest photography names at that time. Uh, he was finally arrested in 1990 for the murder. Now, here's the interesting thing. The reason he was arrested was because the bludgeon wounds in Bob Crane's skull matched what they believed to be a tripod for a camera. Now, what's interesting about that is that John H. Carpenter and Bob Crane, on his many, many exploits, were secretly filming his sexual escapades um, until Bob Crane finally just got tired of him uh, being a nuisance and hanging around all the time. Or as he actually put it in in one report, he referred to Carpenter as a hanger-on and a nuisance to the point of being obnoxious. Uh, and so it's believed that was the motive for Carpenter to kill Crane. Well, they actually found the tripod. Um, Here's the thing, though. It had They found it buried next to a low retention wall near an apartment complex just outside of Scottsdale, Arizona. But it had been buried since the murder. So uh, there pretty much is no DNA evidence. There's no anything. There was a partial fingerprint that matched John H. Cameron, but he's gone. So, I mean, it's one of those things where, like, yeah, they kind of know what happened, but it doesn't mean it's actually resolved. So, let's get into the nitty gritty. Edward Wayne Edwards. Um, I want to start at the very beginning for me. How, like, what turned me on to this guy. Um, I was actually listening to another paranormal talk show called uh, Darkness Radio, hosted by a guy you may know if you've ever watched Ghost Adventures, Dave Schrader. And it's actually a great show. It was on for many, many years. I think it's off the air now. I think Dave Schrader's doing another show. But don't quote me. I'm not really sure. Um, in any case, I was listening to that show, and he had a guest on, and uh, the name of the guest was hold on. Let me look this up real quick because I want to make sure I get it right. John A. Cameron. Um, Let me pull up the thing. Hold on 1 second. I'm trying to find his site, but evidently it's not up anymore. Okay, so anyways, let me. I guess he doesn't have a site anymore. He used to have a really cool site called Cold Case Cameron. He was a detective um, in my home state of Montana. Uh, and he had actually worked the case that he attributes to Edwards. Let me basically spell it out for you. He believes that he killed his first person when he was 8 years old. He believes that he killed the Black Dahlia, Betty Short, when he was 13. He believes he was the Zodiac Killer. Um, he believes that he was responsible for the deaths attributed to the West Memphis Three, and actually did a very convincing job of getting them framed. In fact, he even appeared in uh, one of the scenes in the documentary Paradise Lost, and where the parents of one of the victims was at the child's gravesite. One of the boys, I forget his name, and they're talking about uh, how he missed Christmas, et cetera, et cetera. It is very moving, but in the background, you can actually see an elderly Edward Wayne Edwards walking back and forth, watching them. Uh, he believes that he is responsible for what's her name, Lacey Stevenson, and the list just goes on and on and on and on. But here's the thing: there's actually evidence to suggest he might be right. Over 60 high-profile murders since his childhood until his death in 2012. He admitted to 5 murders. So we know he is, in fact, a murderer. Um, but here's the thing. They actually analyzed uh, the letters that the Zodiac Killer sent the press, and I think he sent most of them to the press, the little ciphers, and I think he sent one to the San Francisco Police Department, if memory serves correctly. Basically taunting them, much the way that Jack the Ripper did when he sent letters to the newspapers and to the police, etc. Um, so they took those letters, the actual letters, and compared it to a like known handwriting samples from Edward Wayne Edwards, and discovered that they were identical. Now, because of the nature of handwriting analysis, they can't say with 100% accuracy that it was him, but come on, it was him. Um, and there was some spooky stuff that came up with Edwards, like like stuff not necessarily related to like the murders, but just interesting facts. Like we know for a fact that he was in L.A. at the age of 13 when Betty Short was killed. We can prove it. We just can't prove that he did what we think. But here's the really scary thing. I live in Akron, Ohio. He was born in Akron, Ohio. His first murder was here. Confirmed murder, that is. He actually appeared on two different television shows. The first was a old 1970s kind of like game show called To Tell the Truth, where a panel of celebrities would ask questions and try and determine out of three separate individuals who the actual person that they're being told about is. You know that old line that Eminem stole with the real so and so, please stand up. That's where that came from. And the other one was What's My Line, which was another kind of similar kind of show. But here's the thing: if the timeline is right, he appeared on To Tell the Truth the day after he fucking killed somebody. He is known, absolutely known, confessed to it, known to have murdered five people, two in Ohio in 1977, two in Wisconsin in 1980, and one in Ohio in 1996. The first murders for which Edwards was convicted of, Billy Lavaco and Judy Straub, a double murder, which, by the way, have very spooky similarities to the Zodiac killings because he favored couples, uh, took place in Ohio in 1977. It's court fact. Like, you can look it up. And he received a life sentence for those crimes in 2010. 2 years later, he was dead. He may have been responsible for the murders of Beverly Allen and Larry Payton in Portland, Oregon in 1960, uh, which two other men were arrested and imprisoned for. And he was notorious for that, if all this holds to be true. Um, that if he committed these murders, he is notorious for pointing, like pointed evidence pointing directly at somebody else so that he could get away with it. Um, so it's entirely possible he was the Zodiac killer. Um, he may have been responsible for the Atlanta and Oakland child murders, the Zodiac killings, John Benet Ramsey, Teresa Halbach, Lacey Peterson. Let's see. I mean, Betty Short, obviously. Um, and here's what's funny. Uh, at age 13, Um, if he killed Betty Short, it was the second time he killed a woman in that way. Because just a few years before Short's death, in I think it was in Chicago, uh, another woman was killed in exactly the same manner, like bisected, um, lunatic, like smile cut into her face, like the whole 9 yards. Like it was absolutely identical. The only difference was in that murder, he did not leave a message on the body written in lipstick. So uh, his first murder would have been when he was 8 years old in 19. No, 6 years old. Would have been when he was 6 years old in 1939. Would have been his first murder. His second murder would have been when he was 8 years old in 1941. So basically, he was killing from 1939 all the way to 2011. That would make him the most prolific, most successful serial killer in history. Now, the author, John Cameron, has theorized about this. He's shown evidence. Check out his book if you can find it. You can probably find it on Amazon called "It's Me." It's uh, Edward Wayne Edwards. It's me, the serial killer you've never heard of. And check out the book. The evidence he shows in that book is so on point. It is so believable. It's fucking spooky. Because I'm telling you now, like if that's fucking true, then half of the serial cases that have blown up in the media over the past 40, 50 years need to get thrown out because he did it, not, whoever went to prison for it. And there's evidence that suggests he was also guilty of the little girl's murder that David Westmore was convicted of. Which, by the way, that whole case was bullshit. They had nothing on that guy. Like, nothing. All they had was circumstantial bullshit. No eyewitnesses to fucking anything. At least none that were believable. And yet, he's still convicted of murder. I thought this was supposed to be you're innocent until proven guilty. And it has to be proven beyond a shadow of a doubt. So, yeah, I mean, like, seriously, if you've never heard of it before, if you haven't heard me talk about it before, check out that book. It's hold on, let me get this right. It's me, Edward Wayne Edwards, a serial killer you've never heard of, is the name of the book. He did write a follow up called "It Was Always Me," which you should check out too. Um, it's a, it's mind blowing, and we know for a fact, by the way, that he was affiliated in some way, at least, with Betty Short, the Black Dahlia, because there's a photograph of them together when he was 13. Which is actually in that book. But what's new is that they found he had actually read a book, an autobiography himself. And nowhere in that book does he actually come out and say, I killed Betty Short. But he does indirectly uh, that's what I'm looking for. He does indirectly, like in his book, pay attention to her. Um, never says her name, but does talk about the lady with the raven black hair, you know, descriptive of her, and it's to a point where if you put it all together, there's no doubt that that's who he's talking about. Plus, there was a letter that he, I don't know if he ever intended to like send it to someone. I don't think he did. I think he was just writing to write, um, basically kind of writing a letter to himself, sort of, or like journaling, I guess would be the correct term. Where once again he was very careful not to directly say anything, which sort of understandable considering he was in prison where he died at the time, uh, where things like that could be searched at any moment. But he does kind of indirectly reference some of those killings, like he had mentioned how Damien Eccles, one of the West Memphis Three, he does actually mention Damien by name, and mentions how uh, I forget exactly how he words it, but he's basically making a joke out of setting up him and the other two West Memphis Three members for those murders in West Memphis. Those I think it was 3 or 4 little boys, like all around age 8. But yeah, definitely. I mean, you can look all this stuff up and check it out yourself. It is mind blowing for sure. Um, there seems to be absolute truth to it. Problem is that since he's dead now, there's no way to prove a lot of it, unfortunately. And since he's gone now, he'll never admit to anything. Um, Anyhow, that is about all the time I've got tonight, folks. I want to thank you all for tuning in. Until next time, my pack, my tribe.